I think the real opportunity comes from not necessarily crypto as an asset for TradFi, but crypto as infrastructure for TradFi. Whether that means 24/7 trading, whether that means instant clearing and settling for exchanges, whether that means new types of structured products that couldn't have existed before. I think it's the ability to serve an ever-growing group of consumers that excites us.
For years, crypto dazzled as a new asset class, volatile, captivating, speculative. But quietly, almost beneath our feet, that energy has been channeled into something deeper, a new foundation where innovation isn't about the coins that we hold, but the architecture we build upon. This is the silent revolution of crypto as infrastructure, seamless rails moving value and trust at the speed of thought, inviting in new structured products, true equity rights, and digital identities shaped by privacy and control. A world unfolding beneath the surface, transforming not just how we invest, but how we belong. Today, we're joined by Aryan Sheikhalian, head of research at CMT Digital, to talk about this unfolding world where crypto becomes the bedrock of not only a new financial era, but a future in which we truly inhabit the spaces that we build. Welcome to the Defiant podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Defiant podcast. I'm your host, Vinny, and I'm here with Aryan Sheikhalian, head of research at CMT Digital. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here all the way from another city here in New York, so thank you.
Well, Chicago to New York is a very easy flight, and it's always good to get back here, so I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to just start with, your background as a researcher, and, crypto is obviously a huge industry with many rabbit holes to go into. And so I'd love to hear what drew you to stablecoins, prediction markets, and tokenized equities?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I got into crypto as a result of being interested in incentive mechanism design, so incentive alignment through mechanism design. This was initially present in consensus mechanisms, so the ICO era around 2017 when I was first researching the space. That sort of first principles thinking of incentive alignment has been something that I've tried to focus on throughout my time in the space, and I think that's pretty applicable now when we look at stablecoins, prediction markets, and kind of some of the latest ways that people are engaging with crypto infrastructure. It's really around that incentive alignment. And I think prediction markets is a really interesting use case of that.
Is there anything kind of interesting you've found? Like when I think about incentives, I feel like it's deeply tied to psychology. So is there anything kind of interesting that you found in this research in incentives within the crypto industry?
Well, I think it's very easy to see how incentives can be influenced through financial means and through the financialization of these games, whether that's prediction markets and futurarchy, or whether that's, DAO voting and governance. But I think there's a role for crypto in incentive alignment where there's not necessarily a tangible or easily quantifiable financialization that can occur. And so thinking about how do you align misaligned incentives and something that perhaps could suffer from the tragedy of the commons, for example. But that does become quite abstract. And I think that's a little bit further out for crypto use cases.
Yes, totally. And so you also spent some time at the Blockchain Research Institute. Can you tell us a little bit about how your time there shaped your perspective on the industry? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, the Blockchain Research Institute, just for some background, it was established in, I want to say 2016, so 2015, 16 sort of timeframe, really early. And it was established by Don Tapscott and Alex Tapscott looking at the use cases of blockchain technology for enterprise. I just come from Accenture, so I'd spent a year in enterprise, I guess you could call it. And for me, it was really interesting looking at kind of what would be first, what would be most applicable today. As part of that, the ICO era was, I guess, less concerned about what is first and what is most applicable today, and more concerned about getting everything out there in terms of blockchain's experimentation. So that didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go, but as I think we're at that stage now with the regulatory clarity that we're seeing to see some of those initial use cases where we were researching back in 2017 starting to be adopted today.
And like for you, Are there any lessons that you think the industry has learned or still needs to learn when it comes to ICOs? Because I think, like you said, there was a big rush of like, okay, we can invest in everything, and everybody's like doing these ICOs. And this happening again at another point where a lot of companies were also releasing their own tokens and launching DAOs and everything. So I don't know, do you think that the ecosystem's matured enough to have a better and more successful ICO process in 2025?
I mean, I think yes and no. I think we see more variety in types of projects that are going out today. That's not to say that they are any more sophisticated in terms of, I want to say, their token model design or maybe even their go-to-market strategy than projects before. But I think there is at least more of a path to go down when it comes to engaging with these projects super early. I remember EOS, for example, back in 2017. For a lot of folks, that was something that was brand new, and they perhaps never had experienced anything like that before. I think now there's a level of familiarity that comes with engaging with ICOs, and perhaps an expectation of what could be a red flag. What am I actually looking for here? And so I think the general population is more aware of what an ICO is and how to engage with it.
And maybe why to engage with it, right?
Yeah.
I think when we go into these bull cycles, it's so easy to just be like, all right, I'm going to buy everything and see what happens. Something will go up, right? And I think like we're in a different mode now where people are like actually looking at the tokenomics, actually looking at, what's the company producing? What are they doing? And that's obviously going to, create some more well-informed decisions.
Exactly.
And so CMT Digital has been a key player in crypto venture capital. Can you give us an overview of the firm's investment philosophy and how they look for opportunities in what we know to be a fast evolving space? Yeah.
So CMT Digital is a blockchain investment subsidiary of the CMT Group, which is a larger proprietary trading firm by background. It was established in 1997 by Scott Casto and Yander Kalurides. So we've always had a trading philosophy and a trading background. Very opportunistic, very trading sort of mindset. In terms of the venture capital efforts and what we look for, I think it's a bit of a continuation of that same sort of trading mindset in terms of where can we be scrappy, where can we add value, where can we kind of support portfolio companies in a way that perhaps other investors couldn't. And I think that lends itself to a lot of crypto projects that we see, because crypto projects are looking for that sort of first principles based approach of who's my target audience? How do I need to structure my incentive scheme? How do I need to structure my tokenomics? How do I need to think about infrastructure design? And I think that's where we can be a little bit scrappier. Typically, I like to say that we look for projects that are strictly better as a result of blockchain technology. So that means they can provide a strictly better product than could otherwise be created without this stack. Obviously, blockchain technology isn't applicable to absolutely everything. It's not going to make absolutely everything better. So I like to say...
Well, some people might disagree, but...
Yeah, I mean, a good example today is, for example, let's look at AI inference. Inference right now is being won at a centralized capacity. Decentralized inference, I think there's a question mark around whether or not that will ever be able to be strictly better than centralized inference. And so I think that until that question is answered, it's not clear to us why inference in a decentralized manner would have to exist.
Yeah, I like that you're asking this question, because I think there is sometimes this feeling of like, oh, well, if you build it, they will come. That's not always true. And especially we're seeing the rise of RWAs, like the asset has to have a market, right? And it has to actually benefit from the crypto rails. Otherwise, you're just building for builder's sake, and that venture might not work out.
Yeah. And not to say that building for builder's sake isn't productive. I mean, a lot of the work that we're seeing in RWAs, tokenization for now especially, is kind of building off of the back of centrifuge tin lake. Now, was Centrifuge Tinlake, is it being relevant today in the conversations around RWA that are occurring? Probably not, but they validated the thesis and they got a product out to market, and there was limited traction. Albeit limited, there was traction. And so I think that's something that crypto provides, is that early experimentation without punishing that experimentation.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because you never know what's going to come next, right? Or what you do build, what's going to be built on top of that. So something that's been taking off in RWAs is tokenized stocks. They're definitely gaining momentum. We have, the NASDAQ even jumping in last week. So what do you think are the biggest drivers behind this trend, and how do you think tokenized stocks are going to reshape the traditional equity markets?
Yeah, great question. I think in terms of drivers, tokenized stocks, I want to think that there is a certain level of demand coming from DeFi natives, coming from crypto natives looking for these alternative exposure mechanisms. And, they are familiar with crypto markets. They like the financial products that they have access to on crypto markets. They like perps, and they want that sort of experience when it comes to equities. And I think that is, to some degree, a validation of the crypto market itself, and the sort of products that they provide. Things like perps that we don't really see much of in TradFi, and leverage and all of the financialization that comes with that. And while I think that's good for initial interest and for initial scaling, I think the real opportunity comes from not necessarily crypto as an asset for TradFi, but crypto as infrastructure for TradFi. Whether that means 24/7 trading, whether that means instant clearing and settling for exchanges, whether that means new types of structured products that couldn't have existed before. I think it's the ability to serve an ever-growing group of consumers that excites us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be tokenized or fractionalized equities. It could be tokenizing for the purpose of using as collateral to generate yield in a safe and stable way in Aave. And so I think there's a variety of different use cases, and it's just a function of who is able to get to the infrastructure quickest.
Yeah, and the demand is there. I remember when Robinhood announced that they were going to start having some tokenized equities that you could buy in Europe, and I was like, but what about us? What about me? And so it's really exciting to see that in just the span of a couple of months, we're now having this conversation where it is going to be available to US citizens and people around the world, because it's clear, right? Like we can complain about cost of living and the weakening dollar and like all these factors that we see are helping to funnel money into crypto assets, especially Bitcoin. But, around the world, there is big demand for US equities and US dollar and all of that. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, there are definitely different narratives happening around the world. And what happens here is obviously going to have lots of effects outside of the US as well. To keep on the topic of tokenized equities, are there any challenges that you see? It's still very new. We're still dipping our toes in. So are there any regulatory, technical, or other challenges that you see facing tokenized equities?
Yeah, I think covenant enforcement, I think dividend rights. Okay, so right now when we look at tokenized equities, there's a few different types of tokenized equities. You've got wrappers, which don't necessarily, you've got synthetics that essentially are instruments that look to mimic the price action or the movement of the underlying.
Right.
Then you've got wrappers, which are essentially like a tokenized form of the equity with some custodian taking control of the underlying and actually issuing you a wrapper that you can then freely buy and sell on crypto exchanges. But those, I think, they don't give you dividend rights necessarily. It's really up to the custodian to pass those through to you and to work that into the wrapper standard.
First red flag.
Yeah. Who wants to give you your dividends? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Covenant enforcement, so things like, or governance enforcement, things like being able to vote on board or shareholder meetings, resolutions. There's no real good way of actually managing that process, especially if you think about KYC and, how do you actually access the underlying, and they don't know where you live. They don't know your email address. How are they going to contact you to actually vote on something?
Right.
But I think that if you look at native tokenization, things like, we're investors in Superstate and they look to tokenize things natively. It's that native tokenization that will be able to handle the dividends and the governance enforcement that I think will be a real game changer, because that then does provide meaningful, different infrastructure or alternative infrastructure for fintechs. I mean, fintechs looking to offer user experiences that are better for their users could play into that.
Yeah, so you've mentioned that tokenization is creating new rails for fintechs. Can you elaborate on what this means and how you see it impacting the broader financial ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I think it just increases velocity. And it increases the ability or it reduces the time it takes for processing, whether that's, asset-backed finance, whether that's credit or repo markets. There's a lot of financial processes, and particularly when we look at illiquid finance, things that typically do have longer sales cycles or operational controls. I think there's a lot of inefficiency in the financial system that is as a result of that specifically. And it's not just one industry or one vertical within finance. I think it's pretty broad. And a lot of that, I think, stands to gain the most from this adoption of crypto infrastructure. And it's really just the ability, it's all downstream of the ability to tokenize and account for these illiquid assets and positions in an automated way, because the ledger is decentralized and because it's transparent and because they don't need to go through reconciliation. And so there's estimates of, 60 to 80% reductions in back office costs as a result of this. And I think that's where we're excited, because that could start to impact, traditional financial companies' business models, and it could give fintechs a meaningful moat in their ability to compete.
Do you foresee any tension with traditional financial institutions? Because something I think about, I don't know if this might be a false analogy, but solar power right now has the ability to power all of the United States in a much more efficient, better for the environment and cheaper way. But we have, many companies saying, well, okay, but then what's going to happen to Con Edison? What happens to me if my business is destroyed by solar, right? And so we do have the technology, we just don't have the backing between regulation and business incentives. Do you see any fears, any challenges with banks maybe being okay, yes, crypto rails are better, but you're talking about reducing a lot of costs, a lot of potentially, subcontracting of work. Do you see any tension there?
Well, yes and no. I think the legacy financial institutions still very much own the customer today.
Yeah.
And I think owning that distribution is going to continue to be important. And for them, it's just a matter of adopting these financial rails or this infrastructure that can allow them to be more efficient. I think that's necessary work that they have to do to protect themselves from competition from new entrants into the market. But do I think that their efforts are inherently at odds with the efforts of the blockchain and financial transformation that we expect? I don't think so. I think it's in the best interest of these banks, investment banks, as well as just financial institutions generally, to adopt the technology where they can. Because at the end of the day, they're competing with each other. And
right.
that's more important than some decentralized protocol that could potentially steal, 2% of their market share for now.
Fair point. And I mean, I'll take myself as an example. I'm going where the money is, like the better yield, the cheaper, faster, better transactions. And I think most people are going to be as, just logical as that, because you can't really afford to be
right.
loyal for loyalty's sake, right? Okay, and so are there any specific use cases or projects in this context of new rails for fintechs that you're particularly excited about?
Well, I mean, I think this asset-backed finance stuff is very interesting. I think looking at reducing the inefficiency in that process is really interesting. I think the financialization of things that we didn't necessarily expect, or the tokenization of things that we didn't necessarily expect, could be interesting. You spoke about solar, but there's a lot of commodities that are very important to us that aren't necessarily represented in any sort of market. One interesting idea that I saw recently was talking about tokenizing GPU compute units themselves.
Yeah.
And I know we've spoken about that a lot when it comes to decentralized compute and decentralized storage. But as more and more of the world moves towards this computerized world, I think those sort of metrics are going to be quite important, if not necessarily for markets themselves, but for hedging future costs, for having more control over your cost environment than you would have before. And I think increasingly we're seeing companies getting engaged with high costs when it comes to GPU usage.
I wonder why. But yeah, it's really interesting. I've seen several crypto companies who are kind of invested in tokenizing things that relate to our digital selves, like whether that's the data that we put out there onto the internet, right? Like we all have a digital profile, of course, that, places like Facebook and Amazon are making plenty of money off of us. And so I'm really excited about the ways in which these thinkers in the blockchain ecosystem are saying okay, well, how can we turn that on its head? How can we make it into a financial product? And specifically, how can we make it something where individuals are benefiting rather than big companies? Because when it comes to big data, which is getting bigger and bigger every year with AI, how are we to compete?
Yeah, I think for what it's worth, I think the individual approach or the individual piece is in a position to be solved. And the reason I say that is Genius and the market structure bill are in a good position. Obviously, Genius has gone through and the market structure bill is currently going through the works. But that somewhat changes the way that distribution works in crypto now.
Right.
I think the next wave of users won't be MetaMask users. They'll just use their Chase app or their Robinhood app, and they'll access their whitelisted DeFi protocols through that. But one thing that is necessary for that sort of adoption of crypto and blockchain, because I think it's going to happen all across the application layer stack, any application that exists today that could benefit from using or offering some sort of blockchain or crypto services would probably do so. But one thing that is necessary for that is an identity layer. And that's something that we don't really have yet, or we don't really have a blanket identity layer yet. And I think that stands to be the separation between the individual and the corporation. And I don't know if we've ever had that sort of separation from a user experience level before. And so there's kind of two groups of projects that I'm excited about. Is one, this traditional finance engagement.
Of course.
And then two, it's everything that's possible as a result of this separation of the individual and the account.
Yeah. And so I guess when you say identity layer, I'm thinking a lot about ZK proofs in order to create that level of difference. Are there any other aspects that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's many different ways of achieving it. It could be a ZK proof. You could upload your passport. I actually got my eye scanned last month in San Francisco at the World Coin Orb. I did research on the ZK stack underneath, and I'm comfortable that it is privacy preserving.
I had a feeling a researcher like yourself would look under every rock before that.
But I mean, they're doing good work in terms of onboarding. They're taking the approach of let's just onboard as many people as we can. We're setting the standard of irises, and we're issuing this proof of humanhood. That could be one aspect.
Proof of humanhood.
And another way is, leaning off of the back of existing standards like passports, government issued IDs. Mm-hmm. You can use ZK TLS. You could take a photo of it and ZK proof the credentials within that photo that are captured. There are so many different ways of doing it, but I think that's part of the problem. There's not necessarily a unified, clear way of moving forward. But I do think that whatever solution is adopted will be some form of ZK. And the benefit of that is the proof schemas can be adaptable to different types of ZK proofs.
Yeah, absolutely. So to pivot a little bit, I'd love to go deeper into the crypto VC space. It's obviously had its ups and downs. How would you describe the current state of crypto venture capital, and what trends are you observing?
Yeah, well, I mean, crypto VC has had a great first half, or at least the best first half of fundraising that we've had in the past, I want to say 3 years. We've seen deal activity pick up, but also fundraise activity in terms of we've seen VCs, ourselves and other VCs as well, actually be able to successfully raise funds, which has been great. So shows that the appetite is starting to return. I would say from what I've seen, there's less quantity and more quality of deals. So
great.
Yeah,
I'm a fan of that.
We're spending more time engaging with companies and spending more time digging in. There's perhaps less opportunities and it's less hectic than it was before. But I think we're in a good spot. I mean, we're on our fourth fund at this point. Mm-hmm. A lot of VCs, I've been with CMT since fund 2. I think a lot of VCs have seen the multiple cycles at this point and, are still here. And so have been able to survive. And so I think it's really an exciting time to be a VC. And we were successfully able to raise fund 4. And I think for a lot of VCs, this is a really exciting time because, again, they've got dry powder. They're excited about the regulatory advancements that have been made, and they're excited to see real change in the market. And so I don't think there's been a better time to be a VC, and we're very excited about 2026 as well.
Yes, us here at the Defiant as well. So from your perspective, are there any sectors within the crypto industry that are maybe, undervalued or overlooked?
Well, right now, I'd say definitely. I mean, we're spending a lot of time on stables, a lot of time on traditional finance, structured products, DeFi. All of that stuff is great. I think a lot of the crypto native stuff, like DePIN, for example, has been overlooked. Now, that's not to say that I think DePIN is going away at all. I think, if anything, this is good because it's providing the financial sort of provenance that would allow DePIN projects to flourish. They're validating the use of crypto rails under the hood. And DePINs are fundamentally just using crypto rails under the hood. Yes, they're coordinating decentralized infrastructure, but the only reason they're able to do that is because of the use of these crypto rails under the hood. So if we've got this traditional finance sector, enterprises today blessing those rails slowly, then it stands to reason that in a couple of years, infrastructure projects will also have to grapple with change in their verticals as a result of the adoption of these crypto rails. And, I think you asked earlier, what sort of projects do we look for? And we were talking about what blockchain is good for. I think blockchain is really good for things that are naturally decentralized or things that exist in a naturally decentralized way. An example of that being data. Yes, inference is probably not going to work best because compute is centralized, and so is going to be more performant than decentralized compute. But data exists in a decentralized manner already. And so if you can collect the data in a decentralized manner without having to centralize it, and you can just serve it in a decentralized manner, then that would probably be a better product. And I think DePIN, there's a lot of things that are naturally decentralized. We're currently switching, when we look at the energy grid, to a more battery-based system. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing upticks in terms of battery storage, replacing generators, for example. And, that seems perfect for a DePIN company. Why not look to tokenize energy at an electron level at the place where they're being stored? And that sort of project, it becomes feasible to think how it could have efficiency gains just because of the view of coordination that it has that energy companies today just don't. Now, obviously, that requires a critical mass of infrastructure being built, of adoption, but that's the stuff that really gets me excited when I think really far out in the future.
Yeah, no, that's such an interesting point to think about, like how things can already start to merge rather than what we have seen over, last cycles where it's like, okay, there's a lot of money coming in, so we're just gonna crypto-fy everything. It's like, oh, some things are fine. Like some things can be left alone. Let's look at to where we're going to see some actual impact here. And so, yeah, I really like that idea. And I think there are a lot of things that are naturally decentralized. I think humans are kind of naturally decentralized, if we get right down to the atom. Definitely. So, okay, so another thing I'd love to touch on, we haven't gotten to talking that much about prediction markets yet, but that's something that is in your area of expertise. What role do you think prediction markets will play in the future of decentralized finance?
Oh boy. I mean, I think it depends on how we define a prediction market, for sure. Is an AMM a prediction market? But I think...
Yeah, how philosophical do you want to get?
yeah. I think prediction markets are great because they give us a medium by which we can put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is valuable. I think there are some problems that prediction markets have yet to solve. And that is definitely things around market resolution, for example. Mm-hmm. There have been issues around market resolution mechanisms being too financialized and therefore being susceptible to gamification as a result of just financial brute force. Mm-hmm. If you hold the most governance tokens to vote on a market resolution mechanism, the market's going to resolve.
What could happen?
Yeah. But I think financial markets were great in the sense that they gave you a medium by which you could express and put your money where your mouth is. I would expect to see a continuation of that, just with more care given to things like market resolution or things like what the scope of this financial market, because the financial market's obviously not going to be able to be applicable to absolutely everything. And as we were talking about, something like the tragedy of the commons wouldn't be able to be financialized in that sense. And so I think I would love to see prediction markets being used within DeFi, not only for outcomes of events, but also for that coordination, because it's the same game that they're uncovering through the prediction market. So whether that's in DAOs, whether that's some form of continuation of futurarchy, I think it's an interesting experimentation going on right now, but it's a little bit too early to, foresee the full extent of its ability to transform.
All right, so you're not taking any bets at this moment.
Well, I mean, the futurarchy idea is really interesting. I just struggle to see how a government could actually be a result of millions and millions of individual financial predictions.
Yeah, and I think I'd rather see it in a simulation first than out in the open. So, so let's talk a little bit about regulation. This is the biggest year for crypto regulation, I think, ever. It's definitely in the United States. So how is that affecting the ways in which you look for projects? Like, obviously, there are a lot of benefits to having clear regulation, but we're also talking about people in the government who are not crypto maxis, who, I would argue don't understand the philosophy and the technology as well as I'd like them. I'd like them to if they're voting on our industry, right? So yeah, how does it, help, or how does it affect the way you shape your strategies for crypto companies and for investors?
Yeah, I mean, there were certain companies that we wouldn't have looked at all, for example, before Genius or the market structure bill came in.
Right.
And there are certain examples of companies where we invested anticipating this regulation. And so the travel rule, for example, or when you look at monitoring and compliance, a lot of the companies that were looking to serve those industry players and markets just weren't seeing demand because there was just no need to. There was no regulation that enforces them to. But I think we're starting to see that change. And so now it's an important point when we look at companies to think about, how are they adhering to regulation? Are they trying to acquire the right licenses? Or are they working with partners? And so I think the room for companies to come up with solutions themselves is shrinking. And so we expect to see companies partnering with each other more and offering their solutions to each other more. And so one thing that we say to our portfolio companies is try to become the default choice. As regulations enable you to service a larger and larger base of customers, that requires going to where who has the distribution. And so if you're offering yield, for example, being a yield button on other front ends, for example, is probably going to be better distribution than owning your own customer and having to worry about having the right licenses yourself. And so I think part of our expectation is that there's going to be a handful of companies that own licensure for their own functions, and they're going to service each other. And everyone else will look to service the users wherever the distribution is.
Yeah, and then of course, regulation being a big part of all business, but especially here in the crypto industry, is there what's your perspective on how these companies can better interact with the regulatory environment? Like, do you see people shaking hands with politicians?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think for what it's worth, the SEC and the new regime has been incredibly willing to talk. Just last week, Axel, who is a portfolio company of ours, Ash, shout out Axel, came to Chicago to meet with Hester Pierce as she was kind of talking to as many operators in these different cities working in the crypto industry as she could. And I personally have never seen that level of engagement coming from regulators. I heard it was an incredible discussion. She was very willing and open to listen to everyone, and everyone
music
spoke.
To my ears.
Yeah, it is very encouraging stuff to hear. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that we're going to keep going in this direction.
Yeah, especially when it's I've been in crypto for the last 4 or 5 years, and everybody who's a responsible builder in crypto does want to see regulation, So it's really encouraging to go from a place where we're can we please talk about this finally, to now actually having meetings, having, the president say positive things about the crypto industry. I mean, yeah, going from not being able to talk about anything to now being able to explore these things. I know there are plenty of lawyers in the crypto space who are working on, creating, documents to share with people, because, this is the type of technology that will benefit a lot of people. And there are a lot of people in crypto who want to create things that are made for people who have traditionally been locked out of certain financial products and certain, wealth building tools. So yeah, it's kind of great. And I'm hoping that we continue to mature as well as learning how to talk to the people that will help enable us to do the most good.
I agree. And I think that was a necessary kind of prerequisite to us being able to have these conversations, is there had to have been some sort of coming together in terms of just nomenclature. Like we just don't speak the same language. And I think that took a few years.
It's very tense for some reason.
Yeah, but I think the worst of those days are behind us, in my opinion.
I sure hope so. I mean, it's at the very least, we've gotten a few things that we desperately needed. And it'll be interesting to see what comes next. And so the crypto market has been through a lot of volatility recently. We've hit some all-time highs in multiple assets. We've also seen, the waves. We know how to ride the waves here in crypto. So from your perspective, what's your outlook for the next year in the crypto markets?
I mean, in the crypto markets, I think there's going to be a level of increase in TVL across protocols that we didn't necessarily anticipate. I think we're going to see a lot more shifting of capital around in a way that we hadn't necessarily done before. A lot of the strategies, a lot of the products that existed within DeFi were specifically catering towards a DeFi native audience.
Right.
And that is changing for the first time in DeFi. And so naturally, I would expect to see the profile of the types of platforms that are increasing in TVL to also change because, traditional financial institutions aren't going to want the same source of yield or necessarily like looping strategies, for example, even as DeFi participants are doing today or as DeFi participants want. And so there's a few things that I've always expected in history or in time with the crypto market. One is I always expect Bitcoin's volatility to go down over time.
Right.
I also expect the velocity of stablecoins to go up with increasing adoption, or at least in an ideal world. If everything is being capital efficient, then you would expect the velocity of stablecoins to go up. And I would also expect to see the TVL of projects to increase. And so it's been a while since we've seen meaningful TVL increases. Obviously, the past 6 months has been incredible.
Yeah, it's been great.
But I wonder how much of that has been net new capital and how much of it has been market appreciation. And I'm hoping to see a continuation of that TVL inflow to a base that's more sticky and perhaps at the same time also more robust in terms of the products they can offer.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We've seen a lot of, Bitcoin whales going into Ethereum or Ethereum whales buying some Solana XRP, right? And it's like, okay, that's great. But we need to also have like non-crypto capital get in, right? We need not just it moving around.
Right.
So to start wrapping up, I'd love to hear from your perspective, since you talk to entrepreneurs on a daily basis, I'd assume, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs or to investors who are looking to get into crypto?
I'd say, obviously, build something that you are deeply passionate about, because you're going to be thinking about it more than you ever wanted to.
In your sleep.
Yeah. But I think the reason that you're building is really important, and be sure that this is something that you have conviction in, because the truth is the opportunity for crypto companies and for blockchain companies, I think, is both easier and harder.
Yeah.
Because it's easier in the sense that people say there's alternative paths to liquidity. But that also makes it harder because there's nothing worse than being stuck in a project that you don't really care about anymore with no incentive to continue doing it.
Right.
And I think that is a fatal position to be in, and only really arises if you don't have conviction on what you're building. And so I think make sure that you have full conviction in what you're building, and make sure you're building it for the people who will be using it and not for the market or for investors, because that's a very easy trap to fall down as well in the space. I mean, just one example I want to give of a portfolio company, EtherFi. They built I remember when I was speaking to Mike back in 2023, they were talking about how they wanted to be a neobank for blockchain. And they really didn't care what investors thought necessarily. They were hyper-focused on servicing the restaking community, those who were looking to lock up their capital in their vaults, and creating a user experience for them that felt like a neobank. And I saw that transition from being a restaking platform to being a cash platform to now being a debit card and encompassing all three. And they were able to execute so well, in my opinion, because they were hyper-focused on their consumer and nothing else. And I know it's a super often said lesson, but I think it's really important, especially important in Web3. I'd say arguably more important in Web3 than Web2, is to be hyper-focused on your consumer.
I think that's a great point because, when I think about the Bitcoin white paper, it is about individuals, right? And that being a formative part of the ideology of crypto. Like, as much as we can love code, the beauty of code, the beauty of business, all of that, right? Like, if it doesn't come down to who's that person that you're helping, well, what's the point?
Right.
It's that convergence that makes it beautiful.
Agreed.
Awesome. Well, Aryan, this has been so wonderful talking to you today. Where can our audience find you and learn more about CMT?
Well, you can go to our website, cmt.digital. I'm on Twitter at AriOnChain. But yeah, thank you for having me so much. This has been awesome.
And thank you for coming such a long way, a medium way.
Not a long way.
To come hang out with us here.
Of course. It's always fun to come back to Brooklyn.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and continue the conversation in the comments. And join us next week when we'll be talking to Ahmad Saeed about the burgeoning trend of vibe coding and how coding with AI can help entrepreneurs get to market faster. But until then, stay tuned, stay informed, stay defiant.